What's up, y'all? It's your girl Ashley coming to you with a new segment on the channel called Dear Cousin Ashley. I'm gonna use this segment essentially to talk about topics that are happening in the queer community, but also just to give my opinion about some things that might be hot topics, questions that you might have. So let's get into the first video. The first topic we're going to talk about is Love is Blind. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, you may or may not be caught up with Love is Blind. On this season, we particularly had a couple named Tyler and Ashley who, in this situation, Tyler has donor kids. The whole situation for me is a little bit, I have so many mixed feelings, mostly sadness, because at the end of the day, there are kids involved that have, a father who's essentially not claiming them. And that's just, a hard situation to be in for any child, whether it be from a queer family or a straight family. But let's break this down. So on the show, off camera, at some point, Tyler tells Ashley that he has kids. He was a donor to some children. Ashley makes a decision that she wants to talk about it on the show. So they bring kind of a segmented part of it to the camera to reveal that Tyler has these kids out there. In the midst of all of this, Bri, who is the mother of the children, comes out and does her own videos talking about her version of the situation. According to Tyler, he was just a donor and he helped out his friend Bri, who was married to a woman, so a lesbian relationship, and he was the donor for that family. He was a friend of hers, so he was around in an uncle capacity, but not the father, and that couple wanted kids, and so he was helping them out. In the midst of him being the donor, the couple, the wife and her spouse, they broke up, and Tyler stepped up in a bigger capacity to be the father of the kids. According to the situation, Bri never actually confirms how the first child was conceived, but Bri goes on to say that the twins, they have 3 children in total, were conceived naturally. Her and Tyler had sex and had these kids. According to Tyler, he was just the donor and he was not essentially the father of the kids. But due to the breakup, he stepped in and helped out this family. We don't know what the truth is. I have my own opinion about it, and my opinion is that from the position of, one, I am a queer woman. I do have a child and I am married and my child was conceived through a donor. My wife is an attorney. And so for us, paperwork, documentation, and clear lines are very, very important. So when I hear this situation, there's so many blurred areas, there's so many blurred lines and places where a situation like this can happen. And so for us, the decision to have a child via donor, and when I say donor, I mean a known donor through a sperm bank. And for those who don't know how this whole thing works, let me give you a little bit of context. So obviously there's a variety of ways that children come into the world. Let's talk specifically about donors. There's an unknown donor, there's a known donor, you can have a person who is a friend of your family or someone that you meet and they are considered a known donor. You can have a known donor that you also go through the sperm bank, meaning you know exactly who the person is, you have pictures and you have background and you have information about the person. But when you go through a sperm bank, the reason why many people choose to do that for their family, and again, I'm going to get into the known situation that Tyler and Ashley found themselves in, Tyler and Bri, I should say, found themselves in, but to speak specifically about a donor going through a sperm bank, which is how my child was conceived. When you go through a sperm bank, you get all this information about who the donor is. They basically give you a book, you flip through, or a website, you get the link, you flip through, you can kind of look and see who's available, look at the characteristics, you can get their traits. Here's the thing about going through a sperm bank. When a man decides to give his donation to the sperm bank, at the same time that he's doing that, he terminates his parental rights. So there's a document that happens where before my family, me and my wife get the sperm, he has eliminated or removed himself as the parent of this child in that process. The sperm bank handles that already. So by the time we get the sperm from the bank, the parental rights are already released. So even though we have a picture of this man, we know exactly who he is not the parent of that child. He has released his parental rights at the time that he gave his donation. Again, if I remind you, my wife's an attorney, paperwork is very important also for me, but more specifically in understanding how paperwork is critical for specifically moments like this, right? So that's a donor route through a sperm bank. Now, there's people who get a donor through not a sperm bank, right? And there's a variety of reasons why people would do it not through a sperm bank. Going through a sperm bank is pricey. It's expensive. You don't necessarily get unlimited tries, right? You pay for vials, and for many situations, vials of sperm are upwards of $1,200, $1,300, $1,400, right? So that's one reason. The second thing is there's not a lot of availability, specifically if you're looking for like a minority donor, a Black donor that has healthy bill of health, a good bill of health, and doesn't have a lot of pre-existing conditions and things like that that are very, very pertinent in the Black community. There are not a lot of options, and there's a lot of situations where people have friends and they have close relatives, or not, I'm sorry, scratch that, not close relatives, people who they're close to who decide, hey, you know what, I will, help you all as a family to grow your family, and they give a donation to the family. That is very common. That is not something that is out of the ordinary. I have friends who have personally done that process. I have friends who have personally grown their family, benefited, have beautiful families, and are flourishing with known donors. Here's the thing though. Those known donors, when they go into those situations, they have an understanding of what the role is that the donor is going to play, right? They're not their father. They're not, they kind of arrange what that's going to look like in the very beginning. And so there's not normally situations where this is the case, where it's like all the lines are completely blurred. And so then we arrive at Ashley and Tyler situation, or Ashley, Tyler, and Bri situation. Tyler was in a capacity of like an uncle to these kids, but biologically he is their father, right? But he was playing a role of uncle. And what gets a little bit confusing and where the water gets murky is when Bri was married and there was another person there, Tyler's capacity as uncle was fine. It was okay for him to be in that role and be around and kind of step in and kind of, play that part. I think where things get a little bit hard and get a little bit gray is where at the moment that the wife and the partner decided they weren't going to get to be together anymore, Tyler stepped up into a role of father. And I imagine, I don't know all the background. My opinion is strictly off of what we know. And if I decide to insert my assumptions, I'll let you know that they're mine. In this situation, we don't know if they had any agreement to terminate Tyler's rights. I don't believe they did, because if they did, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because it'd be clear as day that he did that. And the agreement was that the wife and her spouse were going to take custody of the kids, right? That wasn't the case. So Tyler stepped up, and it gives me kind of the feeling of like when we see families where their dad is in and out of the child's life, is essentially what we start to see, where Tyler steps up, then they get into a fight, him and Bri get into something happens, and then he moves on, or he kind of teeter-totters on how much he's going to be in the kids' lives. And then we get into the twins, where according to Bri, those kids were conceived naturally. Her and Tyler had sex and they had those kids. Bri talked specifically about how that was a challenging thing for her to accept. But I think what we all have to be conscious of is that she made that decision they both made a decision, her being a lesbian, him being a straight man, to have sex and have those children. And whether by mistake or they wanted to have those kids, they're here. And so the hard part about it is there was no wife in the picture for the twins. And so now Tyler's kind of playing loose and fast with the fact that he was helping out this family, but according to Bry, they were together when they had those kids. He was in the capacity of a father when they had those kids, which is why we see public record of him being in contempt of court and her trying to go after him from child support, because he is the legal father of those kids. He's on the birth certificate. There's no document that says that he's not the father. And it's why documentation in the queer community and LGBTQ community is so critical, because we see these situations all the time where a couple, you sometimes will see a couple break up, and then they had the babies with a lesbian, and then they go get with a man, and then it's as if the other partner never existed, right? And so it's so critical that lines are not blurred and that it's extremely clear what the situation is. And I just feel my wanting to say something about this, and this is part one. I'm going to talk about the subsequent interviews that have occurred since the show aired and break down some of the things that have been said about the situation in further videos. But for this one, I think I really want to clarify the fact that a traditional donor through a sperm bank releases parental rights at the time that they give their donation. So when you go through a sperm bank, for a donor as we typically know it in the queer community, that's what happens. When you have a known donor situation, there is sometimes a release of parental rights if the people decide to do it more or less off the through themselves, or maybe they get a lawyer or they go through. But the key here is about the release of parental rights and how Tyler made a decision to step up in a bigger capacity, but in the back of his mind kind of knew that he would always, when he started a family with his wife and he always kind of, it's being painted that he always knew that that was going to be a decision he was going to make, that he wasn't going to be occupying the capacity of a father in those kids' lives. And it's just very unfair for those kids and for that family to have had him there in that capacity, just like if it were a heterosexual family and the father just goes away and now he's not there anymore. I have cousins, I have family members who have been in that situation where it's devastating. And so for me, my heart is really with the children of the situation, because they don't deserve that. They don't deserve to have been brought into a situation where there's so much confusion and there's so much that will be said about them, and there'll be so much made of what their family looks like in a family full of people who made decisions on their behalf. And so we'll get more into the other aspects of this in the new parts of the video. Thank y'all for watching, dear cousin Ashley. I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.